Hello and welcome to another episode of Monkey Builds. This is the occasional series on the Jenny Kirk channel where I, who you might know from the Monday Club as the Cupboard Monkey, build a few models. And they can be model aircraft, they can be all kinds of weird space stuff, or they could be something that goes on a model railway. Today, we're building a Cessna 172. Now, I am a big fan of non-commercial flight, like private aircraft, prop planes and things like that, and the 172 is my favourite aircraft. So, let's see how I got on with that little model you just had a quick glimpse of. Let's have a look. The Cessna 172 kit from Italeri is designed in the standard model aircraft kit design system. You have the wings in several parts, you have the tail wings in several parts, the fuselage is in two pieces, and there's a lot of detail in the inside. So the first thing I did when I was building this model was, of course, paint the individual pieces. It's essential that you do that because once you start building, you're going to run out of space very quickly to get a brush in. Once you've done that and left it to dry, you need to start cutting the pieces out. I recommend, personally, the way I do it, is to leave all of the pieces on the sprues until you need those individual pieces, then cut them out as and when you need them. It makes it so much easier to find them. Now, cutting these pieces out was fairly easy, and for the majority of them, there wasn't an awful lot of flashing left on them, so that was a really good thing in my view. You didn't have to adjust an awful lot, you didn't have to try and whittle things down, but almost immediately I started to run into issues. And the issues were mainly that some of these pieces are incredibly fiddly. You're trying to assemble an engine block for a model aircraft, for example. That's what I'm doing here in the clip that you can see of me when I was building it. I'm putting together an engine block, and the biggest issue I had with this is the moment I started working on it, I realized you weren't going to be able to see any of this, but it's all there. And if you want to build this kit properly, which I had to do for this review, then you've got to assemble that block. There are only a couple of pieces that you need that actually interact with any other part of the build, but they're attached and hanging on to a load of other bits. And then this is a bit I did love. The front of the engine block is, of course, the control system with all the readouts, so it has its own decal. Put that on after you've painted everything and put it into the assembly, and it looks great. You won't be able to see much of it, especially if you're not looking at a certain angle from through the windows, but it's nice to know it's there. Then we get back to assembling this thing, and as you can see already from the video footage here that I've left in, it's a massive hassle to try and put all of these pieces, some of which are incredibly spindly. If you put a little bit too much pressure on, they will snap. So you've got to be very, very careful. But this thing is so fiddly. And again, you won't see any of this when you put the model together. It's all within the front of the fuselage, hidden. There are no openings that allow you to have a look at the engine when it's done. It's just there. You know it's there because you built it, but no one else will. So I did wonder while I was putting all this together why it was there. And that kind of emphasizes one of the issues I had with the kit that I ended up having to mark it down for. Some of it is quite fiddly. These chairs that I'm currently working on in the footage, they were fiddly. They come in multiple parts, including the stands that you have to attach underneath the chairs individually when they could have been part of the actual chair base. It wouldn't have been a problem. Again, you're not going to see these things once you've put them in, so why weren't they a block that you could just stand on? I just don't get it. I know where it's going for accuracy, and perhaps some people want to build only half of the plane itself so they can see the interior or something like that, but for the majority of us, I don't see the point in having these multiple parts to a chair, which had to be glued and glued and glued just to make sure that they stuck together and then positioned in. What really emphasized it, though, was the fact that once you've got them all in, there is one piece that you immediately can't see, and that is the fire extinguisher. There is a fire extinguisher under the pilot's seat. Why? Because there's a one in the original layout on the plane, so it's got to be there, that kind of thing. Very, very fiddly to put all of that together. You can see how small some of it is. But it did work, and it looks quite nice when you see the photos. So now that that's done and all of that's dried, I had to leave it for hours to dry just to make sure, because I knew straight away there was no way I was going to be able to get back in there to adjust anything if anything needed to be adjusted. So I had to make sure that it was okay. Then I started work getting the other pieces out for the fuselage. This is where the build got far easier and far more fun, I have to admit, because I found some of the fiddly, tedious parts weren't that great, but once you get to the fuselage, well, the majority of it's in big blocks, so you can get on really quickly. So the detail level on the actual outside, that's still good as well. There are a number of little pieces where it's obvious that panels are riveted together. The thing looks like it's a metal plane. It looks right. Everything's in the right place. All of the little details are great. Getting the inside to fit wasn't actually as bad as I expected it to be. It kind of just slides in. Once you've put a couple of bits into it on either side to block off the interior and make sure that you don't see the hollowness of the back end of the tail and things like that, the inside really did come together very nicely. So I was actually impressed by how quickly that came together. The same with the wings. Now, I've mentioned later on in my conclusion that I would have preferred if the flaps could be adjusted to suit yourself, but they're not. They're just part of the plane. And that's unfortunate because the chairs are in multiple parts, the engine block is in multiple parts, even though you can't see all of this, but the bit you can see, the wings, only 3 parts. It could have very easily been 4 or 5 or even 6 to make the flaps adjustable and things like that, just for added fun and added realism. But no, they're not. So there's detail where you can't see it and no detail where you can. And that's not the best. But anyway, there was a little bit of flashing on the interior of the wings, but once I cut that off a little bit, the wings went straight onto the main body and it all worked out. So you can see there's a grey bit on the tail. For some reason I just forgot to paint that and I had to go over it again. So later on you'll see that that disappears when I'm doing the decals and things like that. It's just because I gave the entire thing another coat of paint after it was built, just to make sure that it would be all top-notch and the best I could make it. So I had a lot of fun with that, and then the best part really was when I'm painting all of this and getting the glue in, I made sure that the propeller could go around. I had glued it in, but while it was drying, I would just turn it gently. It's something that I learned from one of my cousins when I was much, much younger and making World War II aircraft. We were both into it. That you can glue it, and while it's drying, turn and turn and turn. So the glue basically holds it in place as a kind of friction lock rather than anything else. So as you can see, the final build came together quick, and the propeller does move. Once that was done, I left it to dry for a while, painted it, left it to dry again, and then we got onto these decals. Now this was difficult. This is a difficult part of the build because there are quite fiddly decals. The side decals around the tail were fiddly, and then there are decals on top of decals. Now you'll see those black lines down the side. Those had decals to go on top of them for the registration. And you can see me putting here DECJB onto the underside using Q-tips. I did listen to you guys when you were mentioning the decals and how I shouldn't use my fingers so much. So I did that and then adjusted them in place with the Q-tips and all of that. But it wasn't actually as bad as I expected. It took about 45 minutes to get all of the decals on, and it was nowhere near as fiddly as I expected. Everything kind of just went into place. The main issue with it was getting some of these little decals that go down the edges of the spine of the fuselage onto the tail and around the back tail and things like that. Because they could easily have said, no, you just paint it. Some of the other liveries, like the green one there, the camouflage one that you could do for the Czech Air Force and things like that, they are painted, but this white livery, the main livery, the one that's on the cover of the box, has decals of the black lines that go down the side and across the tail and things like that, just so that you get the proper lines and the gold, very thin gold lines that go with it. As you can see here, there's some gold lines with those black ones. They're all decals. They could have easily said, no, just paint that on, and it would have been fine. I wouldn't have said anything about that, but the fact that they gave you them so you get the extra straight lines, that was just amazing. Extra detail, which actually turned out to be very, very good. I was very impressed. The propeller decals were a little tricky to get on, but they've worked out. And again, if it wasn't for the fact that it dropped at one point and broke because some of this stuff is fragile, and the fact that I accidentally put my fingers onto the windscreen, this would be an amazing model. So to be honest with you, the majority of all of the issues with it are down to my inexperience. This is a good model. I've enjoyed making it. So, there we are. It was a troubling build, but to be honest with you, a lot of the trouble I had is actually down to my own experience. As a kid, I built huge amounts of model aircraft. It was one of my main hobbies outside of computers, and I got pretty good at it. But as with any skill like that, when you stop doing things, you lose the ability. So when I'm coming back to it, I'm not as experienced as I would hope I was, and you make a few little mistakes. So a lot of this is down to, a lot of the issues that I had with the model are down to my lack of experience. There are a few things I would say about this little model that perhaps should have been changed. And for example, here is the top of it and the bottom. You can see on the base they've got the flaps. The flaps are visible. They look as if they're a separate piece. They aren't. But the wings are in 3 pieces. So why not have the flaps adjustable, especially since on the box where you see this particular livery of the Cessna coming into land, the flaps are down. So adjustable flaps would have been an excellent extra piece, especially since there are extras in this that you just can't see. For example, inside the cab, there is a fire extinguisher under one of the seats in this plane. So there are extra details that are there simply for the sake of detail and for the people building it to know that it's there. But the flaps can't be adjusted to suit which position you want the plane in. That seems a bit weird to me, so that's just how it is from my point of view. There are a few questionable decisions in the actual design and construction of the kit, but on the whole, any issues that came from it are due to my inexperience. So in conclusion, I would give this a solid 7.5 out of 10 in terms of kits. It's a great kit, it's a great model, it is pretty much the only Cessna model. If you want a Cessna 172, the Italeri model is the one you have to get, because there aren't any others that I could find, and I was looking for this for years. They're not out there in great numbers, it's not the most popular build, but I like it, it's my favourite kind of plane, so I had to have it. And that's the situation. If you want a Cessna, you go for this one. It's not a bad kit. I actually enjoyed putting it together. It took quite a while, and there are some damaged bits to it. For example, the little aerials on top. You can see I've broken one. It's just how it is, because they're so fragile that if you knock this or drop it, which unfortunately happened one time between me finishing and building it and letting it dry off, and then me painting it and letting that dry off, and then putting the decals on, it got knocked and landed top down. One of the aerials broke. It's just how it is. So don't mark it down from your point of view for the errors that happened from my experience. It's a decent kit, solid 7.5 out of 10. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you have enjoyed it, and if you did, thank you very much. Remember to click that like button and do share it with your friends so that they can see what models are out there. Subscribe for the channel because there will be more videos. Jenny will be back on Monday with the Monday Club. I'll see you then. Bye.
I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Michael Lockie, Helen Sink, Peter Bolton, Brian and Dorothy Mudd, Gary Lewis, David Quinn, Sparky107107, George Botterini, Andy Finch, Chris Moss, Robert Steers, MD of San Juan Model Company and Grantline Products, Sam Yates, Dale Williams, John N. from NC, NYMRish, Jonathan Foster, Peter, Graham Foster, Clifford Ison, Larry W. Grant, and Mo Henry. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.